Item 11 on the agenda, which is the exceptions from the application of contract standing orders, and that is Lindsay Sim. Lindsay's online. Over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. This report provides committee with a regular update on the request for exceptions to contract standing orders. In this period, there have been 3 exceptions considered and granted as detailed within the report. The report also details 1 contract that was awarded without an exception being sought in advance. Assisted by colleagues, I'm happy to answer any questions on the paper. Thank you.
Any questions?
This one because it.
Hi Lindsay, don't know if you can hear me or not, but page 200, I was just wondering what is a Crown commercial contact via G-Cloud 13 call-off contract?
Sorry, I'm just finding the appropriate part in the report. So the Crown Commercial G-Cloud 13 call-off contract is quite a complex terminology just for the type of contract it is. So on the framework, it's the Crown Commercial contract, and it refers to a G-Cloud 13 call-off. So that is the part of that contract that relates to this type of procurement. So it's just a terminology for that section. Each of them have their own sort of terminology.
Not very sure I got what it is. Can you be a little bit more precise? What is a Crown Commercial contract?
There are contracts that are formed through Crown Commercial, and local authorities have the ability to call off from those contracts rather to go out to full tender and they can award directly off the contract. So its suppliers have already gone through a sort of an exercise sort of nationally to look to see which ones can be covered by that framework. So then we can go direct to the framework and call off a supplier from that framework. Does that help?
Yes, that's perfect. Thanks very much.
Lindsay, on the dial journey issue on page 202, I recognise that there were a lot of discussions back and forth on dial journey in the past, and the contract's continuing on to March 2025. Are there any plans within that time to move to a formal procurement process, or will it continue to just be a sort of ongoing review of that?
I believe there is an ongoing review of transport, and I'll ask one of my colleagues, Kevin's got his hand up, to come in and comment on that, if that's okay.
Thank you, through you, Chair. In terms of that particular piece of work, through that period, we will be working with Dial Journey in terms of where they're at, but it will feed into a wider piece of work that our colleague Lorraine is working on in terms of that wider community transport piece of work. We are currently developing or working towards a paper that will come before Council in advance of that period. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. I'm happy to formally move the paper. Move a seconder. Yeah, Councillor Boyd, thank you. The paper is open to debate. You want to debate the paper? No. You're happy to formally move the paper? Okay, thank you. On to item 12 on the agenda, draft council financial performance for 23-24. And that's over to you again, Lindsay. Thank you.
Thank you. So this paper provides an update on the financial performance for the Council for the year ended 31st of March 2024. Sorry, bear with me, I'm having system issues. So this is based on actual spend up to the 31st of March 2024. So members are asked to note that these figures are draft following completion of the preparation of the draft annual accounts and the approved final accounts following the external audit process. These will be confirmed. There was a briefing for committee members held yesterday on this paper and on the 24-25 paper also. I'll go through some of the key highlights of the paper. So the general fund revenue is reporting an underspend of 1.98 million for the year before earmarking of reserves. Earmarked reserves of 3.012 million are deducted for use in future years, resulting in a net draw in reserves of just over 1 million. On review of the earmarked reserves, 801,000 has also been released, which reduces reserves by 234,000. A full review of the earmarked reserves is underway, and the final position will be reported as part of the 23-24 draft annual accounts. A summary of the outturn position across directorates is provided in Appendix 1, which includes those earmarked funds, and full detailed spend by service area is provided in Appendices 3 to 6. The CLAP management element of the Health and Social Care Partnership is outturning an overspend position for the year of 3.7 million, which is 35,000 greater than previously forecast. This overspend has been met within the partnership overall funding envelope, including the use of partnership reserves, and there is no additional contribution required to be made for the council. The General Fund Capital Programme is outturning an underspend of 12.8 million, which is across various projects against a revised approved budget of 26.97 million. Just over 10 million of this has been carried forward into 24-25 to allow completion of the projects. A summary of the forecast per asset plan is provided at section 6.3 of the report, and detail by project is provided in Appendix 10. In relation to savings, the Council has achieved 69% of the approved 3.8 million savings. Unachieved savings will continue to be pursued or alternatives identified through 24-25. Details of individual savings are included in Appendix 2. The housing revenue account revenue element is outturning a surplus of 4.7 million, which is 891,000 above the budgeted surplus. The HRA capital programme is outturning an underspend of 4.007 million, and I have at this point just to point out an error at section 2.1.4 of the report, where it notes that the underspend is 5.260. It is actually 4.007, and apologies for that error in the report. Within the capital outturn, several projects have underspent, and the associated budgets are being carried forward to 24-25, which amounts to 6.906 million. However, there are also overspends within the programme, which are detailed in the report and Appendix 9. These overspends increase the funding requirement and borrowing for the year, therefore are not netted off against the underspends being carried forward, which is why the carry forward amount of 6.9 million is greater than the underspend of 4 million. The report notes that the overspends have not been authorised, and measures are being put in place to ensure that spend is managed in line with the approved budgets. Details of the HRA revenue and capital forecasts outturn are provided in Appendices 8 and 9. Happy to take any questions on the paper supported by my colleagues. Thank you.
I'll just kick off, Lindsay. It's probably here within the paper, and apologies if I've not noted it, but in terms of, saying that the full savings were not recovered, and in fact there were some overspends in different areas, I'm wondering why we then had an overall underspend if we weren't finding the savings that, and I know it'll probably be in the drill down and all the different figures, I just found them really hard to read with the size of them. So I'm wondering if you could just give me a kind of general explanation as to why that was.
Sure, yeah. So of the approved savings programme, not all the savings were achieved. So that means that falls as an overspend within the service budgets. But within that, the service budgets have also got compensatory underspends on other areas. So these underspends are offsetting the non-achievement of savings, which has resulted in an overspend position. An underspend position.
Councillor Forson?
Lindsay, these are still shown as draft accounts, so it's 23-24. At what point do they become finalised? Because we're, more than halfway through the kind of 24-25, kind of session.
Yep. So as normal, we would prepare the draft annual accounts, and they would be submitted. So we are a bit later in the process for that. And then we would have the external audit, and we would present to council the approved accounts. So we still have to go through the draft preparation of the annual accounts, then the audit process, and then the approval of the final account. So at that point, they will be confirmed. So I think we're estimating, which is in one of the future reports, I think it's March, for approval of the final 23-24 accounts following the audit.
Okay, thanks. Next questions from me is about the unachieved approved savings for 23-24. There's quite a few of them in there. I think it works out at 30% of the overall savings weren't achieved. And I'm just very conscious we're starting the process of budget again, and when the savings are put forward to councillors for consideration, you're given very firm assurances that these are going to be achievable, and it's very unlikely that they won't be achieved. But I'm particularly looking at some of the management efficiencies in there, where there was voluntary severances, and that adds up to a fair bit that's not been achieved in both partnership and transformation, but also in the police directorate. And I'm just wondering if there's any comment on these particular savings, because we've been given similar ones to consider again this year, and obviously the achievability of them is really key.
So we did a specific exercise as part of the budget process for last year, asking people to come forward if they would like voluntary severance. So we looked at that across each of the directorates to see which posts we could release, because if we release the person to go on voluntary severance, we remove the work that they do. So there is obviously an element of redesign in the services that needs to go on to either stop doing the work that that person then did, or do it differently within the service. So it was part of the savings have been achieved in terms of that VS, and some of them haven't been. So it's a different scenario in each of the services. And whilst services have tried to redesign, there's been other factors that have impacted that. So these savings then roll into next year to 24-25, and again, still being looked at to see if the service can be redesigned. I don't know if there's any specific comments either the directors would like to add to that.
I suppose I come in terms of the P&P one, so as Lindsay highlighted, the exercise was undertaken to identify a proportion of VS as something we could likely achieve. Unfortunately, within P&P, we've talked about capacity issues already within finance, within IT, etc. So we couldn't authorise those posts to go. Obviously, we've got a VS situation and we've got a VR situation. So the VS is obviously the individual staff members coming forward asking to leave, whereas the VR situation is where the council is making that decision. So we are reviewing it, as Lindsay says, as part of service redesign and P&P. But at the time, when staff were putting forward their expressions to be considered, there had been an element taken in terms of budget assumption. We couldn't release those staff.
Can I just come back on that? Because I remember asking the question during the budget process last year, are these going to be achievable? Because many people might just put in their, papers to find out actually how much might I get if I go, and there wasn't much intention. But, there was firm assurances given at that point that we fully expect to be able to kind of meet these. So I suppose I'm asking for assurances that there will be a much more robust process moving forward. Because if there hadn't been the underspends in the service, this would have been quite serious for us. So I'm just looking for a bit more assurance there.
When we calculated to look at the actual figure for the savings, we did make a number of assumptions. So we didn't take full 100% on the basis that we would not be able to let everybody go. So it was apportioned, and it was also apportioned on a time basis, that it would take time to implement and release that employee and cover the work another way. So there were some assumptions, but I think just in the sheer volume that had come forward, it was just not achievable to do all of them within that timescale, which has taken longer.
Okay, I've got another question, and it's kind of related. I mean, we are shown an overall underspend, but that's a bit offset by the unachieved savings, which were over £1 million there. So if those unachieved savings had been achieved, the underspend would have been quite significant. And I'm trying to drill down to the information really relating to the underspends, because you know, we're making decisions as councillors time and time again that are impacting on services, impacting on communities based on balancing the budget and coming out, you know, on kind of on balance. So if we're taking decisions but there's underspends in the service, you've kind of got to understand that we're thinking, well, did we need to take such, you know, kind of difficult decisions that are really impacting on communities and services? So really just to get a picture of the overall underspend picture and how that has arisen, and you know, are we expecting that to continue moving forward?
So I suppose the first thing to point out is around, although it's a 1.9 million underspend, there is 3 million of earmarked reserves. So that includes things with grants that we've received with specific terms and conditions that we've not managed to spend within the year, but that we can carry forward into future years. So once you take that net position, it is actually an overspend. So there haven't been savings within the services that have covered everything entirely. Also, we took management action throughout the year to move to essential spend and a recruitment freeze. So these were things that we were recognising that we needed to do to try and bring the spend down to make sure we were coming in on budget and to look forward to build up our reserves for future years. So those two elements have impacted on that. So, but the net position, just go back to that, is really that we've got a draw on our minimum reserves are at 2%, and with that, just over that million as a net overspend and releasing reserves by the 800, we've still got 235,000 of an overspend that is reducing our minimum reserve level. So it is, I understand and see what you're saying in terms of we're putting savings up, but we have actually impacted on our 2% minimum reserve level by the outturn that I'm presenting to you today.
Lindsay, would you not, if you had grant funding that was not spent, would you not put that into deferred income?
We operate it through earmarked reserves through the council.
I think the point we're kind of trying to make here is that the picture that we're being shown is not actually the picture that exists. Janine's point about showing that as a separate issue would have revealed the fact that we actually had a net overspend for the year. I mean, it's kind of a wee bit more smoke and mirrors again. And I think it might be better if the information was presented in a more simple way. The facts of the matter are that we overspent last year. Luckily, we've got some grant money hanging in the wind, but we didn't spend it, so it's irrelevant in the previous year report, except as a footnote to say we've got this money rolling forward.
I can take aboard your comments. It is detailed within the report that there is an overspend and a draw on reserves, but I can make that more clear for going forward.
Yeah, I think, like, you know, just like you would do if you had a set of management accounts, for example, it'd be really useful for us, I think, to see highlights. So, for example, like, there are aspects like that, and like what Councillor Forson was saying in terms of like different areas where there are significant underspends, which has led to the savings not being such an issue. It'd be great for us to have that detail, because it would let us then see areas where maybe, you know, there's underperformance, or, you know, there's aspects not moving forward for different reasons. I think it would give us a lot more context to allow us to do proper scrutiny if we just knew, because as I said, this table, like, again, I would much appreciate it if there was headlines, because it's really hard to take it all in the size that it is. And I think it would be really helpful to have just headlines pulled out for us, so that we are looking at those headline issues of there was an underspend of, say, 300,000 in this department, which offset the saving that was unable to be made in that department, or, you know, along those lines. I think it would be really helpful. If that would be okay, would that be possible?
The content that's in the appendices, because there is so many areas within each of the directorates, does try and pull out those highlights, but I appreciate that there is a lot of information in there, so it's very difficult to just identify one area that is offsetting maybe an unachieved saving, and that be the only thing that we pull out from that. So the narrative gives a sort of fuller picture, And back to maybe Councillor Forston's point about, well, where are the underspends and can we take these as savings? So that's one of the things we do is the budget process. But as always, I can review the information and try and make that more understandable and more useful.
Thank you. Happy to move this paper. I mean, again, I know the pressure that's on the team in terms of pulling the information together, and you know, you have provided us a very detailed report, and there's loads of information in there for us to absorb, which is really helpful from an audit point of view. So we really do appreciate that. But as I think we've all raised, I think it would be really useful for us to have more of that context, really just moving forward. So if that was possible, that would be really helpful. So happy to move the paper. Can I have a seconder? Anyone want to debate the paper?
Yes, can I just say it's I mean it is very technical what we're doing here, and what makes it even worse is when you don't know exactly whether you're being positive or negative. And with all due respect, if we don't understand what's being said, then we can't make the proper decision. So we need to make it much easier to actually understand, and bearing in mind it's not a very easy thing to do if you can't accept what's being said because you're not quite sure what's happening. And to me, that means that I'm not getting the information that I should be getting because I'm not understanding properly what happens. And that could be me, that could be because of me, but none of us sitting here are deep into that kind of conversation. So I think it would be easy if it was easier to understand. And I went to the one yesterday, and I went through it, and I did understand a lot of it. But I'm still not grasping at the roots of it because it's very technical.
I mean, it's a really good point, Martha, because every accountancy job I've ever gone for, they've said, how do you convey financial information to non-financial managers? And that's the first thing they ask you is like, how do you convey that? And it's, for us to do proper scrutiny, I think it needs to be that it's accessible to all. So you need to, like one of the charities I work for, I go in and just say it very, very basically because they can't go further than that. And I think it's really important to understand your audience can be at all levels as well. And it's not a gap in your audience, it's just, and again, that's not a criticism, Lindsay, because I know how an accountant thinks. You're just like, right, this is the information, I've got it, it's fine, I know what it means. But often the audience don't really know, so it's good for us to have it in a really clear, understandable focus, if that would be able to be done. So, yeah, I agree. Thanks.
I would just add to that my complete endorsement of what's just been said, because I mean, you and I are both familiar with a lot of accountancy, but public sector accounting is extremely different, and the information is presented in a different way. And I'm still trying to come to terms with a hell of a lot of information there. It's kind of spread over the table in lots of wee bits and pieces. And ideally, you want an exec summary that tells you a kind of narrative broadly of what you're going to read in the detail. Stuff in the detail should not vary from the exec summary. The exec summary should be a good précis of all of the stuff that's lying underneath the underlying data. So it's maybe just to look again at as you say, your audience and write the reports that it's for a bunch of smart sixth formers who don't know anything. They're brilliant, they don't know anything about accounting. And that's maybe the kind of approach to take in things, very complex matters like this, because I mean, I know about the numbers, but you have to read this 3 times to really understand what's going on, jumping backwards and forwards, trying to follow things. So yeah, not easy, Lindsay. It's as Janine says, know your audience. We're not like you are, I'm afraid.
So, are we happy to?
I didn't mean that as an insult, by the way.
Are we happy to note the paper? Yes. Okay, thanks. So we'll move on to the next paper, which is item 13 on the agenda, Council Financial Performance 2024-25 as at June 2024. So sort of just at the start of the year. So that is Lindsay again.
Thank you. Apologies, this report does follow the same format in the complexity, so I'll take the comments from the previous one onto this one as well. So trying to keep it brief then, so the general fund revenue is forecasting an overspend position of just under 700,000 for the year. And that's broken down across the services, so you can see that the overspend is mostly within people and place, and they're in line with financial regs. There's recovery plans and actions being put in place by the services to try and bring spend in line with budget at the end of the year. I've also included, at the request of committee previously, a table on earmarked reserves, so that shows you all the committed reserves that we have, and that amounts to 23.2 million at the start of the year, and there's a drawdown every quarter, so we'll be reporting that to show you what's left. The club manager element of the Health and Social Care Partnership, so it's forecasting an overspend for the year of 6.5 million, and that's based on information at the first quarter. So this contributes to the overall overspend for the partnership of 12.6 million. So that was reported to the IJB at the start of October. So again, a recovery plan is being developed to bring spend in line with budget. However, there is a risk that this will not be managed within the current financial year. In terms of general fund capital, it's forecasting an underspend of just under 2.5 million across the various projects. In relation to savings, the council is forecast to deliver 4.8 million of the approved 5.4, so that's around 89%. The 600,000 are identified at risk at the moment, but they will be pursued to try and be achieved throughout the year. The housing revenue account is forecasting a surplus, which is just over 1 million above the budgeted surplus. And the HRA capital programme is forecasting an underspend of 1.5 million against the budget. So again, happy to take any questions on the paper.
In terms of the carry forward voluntary severance you mentioned in the prior year, were those savings then achieved up at this point in this year? Because I didn't notice them as sort of carrying forward as a potential area not recovered in this year.
So we don't report on savings from the previous year. We only show the savings that were agreed for this coming year. So the progress on those, I know that there has been some progress, but they've not all been achieved. But that's not explicitly shown in the papers.
Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you had said in the previous paper that they were carried forward. Is that in a different kind of way, like not into the reports, but sort of running in the background?
So the budget was permanently reduced. So it just means that the saving is still to be made because the budget is less than it would have been, but they don't form part of the list of the approved savings and progress against them because they were previous years. So we only show the current year savings that were approved in March this year.
The other area that Councillor Forson and I discussed before she had to leave, unfortunately, was obviously the Health and Social Care Partnership forecasted overspend of 6.47 million. Our constituent authorities, and I know that some partners from there are here today, in view of the significant recovery that has to be done on that and the kind of recovery plan, I wonder how much work the constituent authorities are doing with the HSPC to sort of make sure that we're not in a position where we've got this amount to meet at the end of the financial year, and if there's partnership working in place to take that forward. And I can see that Ewan's wanting to come in. Thanks, Ewan.
Thank you, Chair. The integration scheme sets out a requirement around the where a recovery plan is required, that's agreed with the Directors of Finance, Chief Finance Officers over the constituent authorities, as well as the Chief Officer and I. And in addition to that, we are working very closely with the executive team across all the constituent authorities. So I can give that assurance around the engagement and the partnership working around it. Thanks.
Thanks. Just sticking with that subject then, looking at page 259, the 6 million of the shortfall is under three headings: nursing homes, care at home and daycare. As the year goes on and rolls out, it must be obvious that every time you spend £1 in any one of those, you're adding to the problem. And which makes me wonder about the level at which decisions are taken to spend the money. I mean, if the system isn't working properly and these three particular headings are just putting in bills for care without considering the impact of that, then there's a management problem here. There ought to be a system which is feeding back to the management that any further expenditure in this area is beyond its budget, and a decision has to be taken whether to agree that expenditure or not. I think we need to look at decision making, whether it's going high enough up the tree when it hits a trigger point. Have you any comment to make on how the decisions to spend those pounds in those three particular areas, which are the main cause of the problem, are taken?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. It's quite a complex field, this, because there's the requirements around living within our resources. There's also significant legal requirements on the council in terms of statutory obligations in relation to, in particular, the Social Work Scotland Act. We have a hierarchy of decision making, and one of the controls that the interim chief officer and I put in during this year was we actually reduced the level of delegated authority across all the levels and established what we called a senior resource allocation group, where some of the high tariff cases are coming to us on a monthly basis for detailed scrutiny challenge. They are presented by generally the team leader for the service associated. As part of that process, we've generally been presented with cases in terms of a level of need and a lack of alternatives, where we have really had no alternative other than to agree the packages of care. On a wider perspective, there is something we're observing, and this is common across the whole country, that post-pandemic, the level of demand for social care has materially increased. In some areas, it's more than doubled compared to long-term pre-pandemic trends. Some of that is just about the demographics of our population and the changing needs associated with that. Some of it is probably something we don't quite, as a country, quite fully understand yet, in terms of people are living longer but not healthier, and are living longer with significant multiple and complex needs, and more people are in that basket. That makes the decision making really difficult. Though I do appreciate the committee's concerns around the position, and Lindsay's right to emphasise a bit around the requirement for the recovery plan, which we are working on at the moment. I'm about to go and have with my senior leadership team this afternoon some of these difficult conversations that you've just referred to, Councillor. We have these in an ongoing basis. It is really difficult to solve this challenge we've got, and it will take some real difficult and pretty courageous decision making across both the IGBs and going back to your chair's point, across the constituent authorities and in terms of whole system solutions to sustainability. Thank you.
Can I just pop in there, then, in terms of understand all that, because we know that we're dealing with a real sort of crisis in the care sector and in the mental health sector as well, but there's been a lot of narrative over the years in terms of transformation. Now, I'm not sure how we can manage transformation when we're dealing with a crisis. So how do the two work together?
Thank you, Chair. It's a really valid point. What I've been saying to the IGB is we need to interweave some of the short-term recovery measures, some of which are going to be really difficult and come with an increased level of risk than we have felt tolerable up to this point. But at the same time, we need to be building the longer term solutions. So from that point of view, the IGB will receive it every meeting going forward, probably quite challenging, quite difficult decisions to make with directions to the constituent authorities to implement. I think that will be a position we see for the foreseeable future in terms of the level of change we need to see. So the strategic commissioning plan priorities are set, and if I can refer to some of the key messages of the Accounts Commission published a report quite recently in IGB's finance and performance, and they made an observation around, as well as the financial strain the system is under, not seeing the level of change in terms of a material and demonstrable shift to community services that was envisaged by the establishment of IGB. So we need to take that mantle on as well in terms of our decision making. Change is really difficult, and there'll be, our service users are affected. We need to engage with staff and so on. We need to look at the amount of different locations we deliver services from currently isn't sustainable going forward. So we need to look at all of these things, and nothing can be off the table. We need to be more radical going forward. Thank you.
Because I think on Dennis's point, you wouldn't be keeping spending into a black hole. You would be finding, your budgets. Otherwise, there'd be no point in setting a budget, because, your budget would be meaningless. So, I'm just hoping that moving forward, when we, to put it into a question, because I'm over at question phase, but when we go to budget setting next year, I hope we'll be anticipating some of this rather than dealing with it as it's happened partway through the year. Will we?
Yes, indeed.
Well, I would add to that when you're preparing the budget and you know that elements of it are volatile and may well exceed, you also at the same time have to prepare a list of sacrificial lambs, the things that will go. If you're getting too much demand in the big ticket stuff, then there are other things that you need to look at and say, well, sorry, if we want to help these particular 10 care packages, these other 55 things will have to stop. You've got to prepare for disaster in a volatile market. When you take your ship to sea, you plan for the dangers, don't you?
Yeah. Martha, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Everything you said is fine until you remember it's actually people that would have to be sideswiped if we don't have the money. There's a very high risk and threat to both councils through the IGB at the moment, and we can't ignore that. And we will have to do stuff, but we can't do it on top of people who are dying because they haven't got the stuff. So it's going to be very, very difficult. It's not an easy ask, and it's not going to be easy. But if we don't have the money, we can't do it. We can't do it if we don't have the money. So we need to. I spoke to you yesterday about this as well. That we need to look at what we can do and how we can do it in small amounts, so it's not putting anybody's life at risk, but at the same time having to get a lot of money back so that we can keep going as IGB. Because at the moment, between Stirling and Carmarthenshire, we're not going to get very far.
Question, Martha, sorry. It's just we're still at question phase. Could you put that into a question?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
We're at silly question phase. Could you formulate that into a question and then?
Oh, yeah, am I right in saying that?
That was a deep turnaround, Martha. You're absolutely right. It comes down to risk appetite, risk tolerance, and priorities at the end of the day. But none of that is particularly simple, and it's always difficult. We are talking about a level of service reduction required, and that is always really difficult in terms of how we both plan and deliver that. It's going to be probably our most challenging period for going forward, particularly. And some of what we're going to have to do in the short term is over winter, where demand for health and social care services generally goes up, and that comes with a level of risk as well. So yeah, but I agree with your point.
Yeah, I think it's such a valid point, because I think ultimately, will it not be the case that, if we make the savings in social care, we're just going to increase the money in NHS? Because somebody who then doesn't get their social care package will go into crisis and will end up within the NHS. So effectively we don't save, because the money that we save on social care ends up in crisis services. Is that not correct?
There's no easy answer.
No.
That is a real risk, Chair.
Yeah.
You in the forecast overspend in June, as you had the report indicates, is well over £6 million. Could you be a wee bit more explicit in terms of what the Joint Integration Board is doing to address this overspend? And given that we're now in October, can you give us some sort of indication of how the outcomes are looking in terms of where we sit at the moment in October?
Thank you, Councillor. Lindsay's report reflects how the position I presented to the IGB on the 2nd of October. That set out what I referred to as a pessimistic scenario in terms of a £12.5 million overspent across the whole partnership budget. I don't expect at the mid-year point our position will be materially different from that. We are seeing some pockets of improvement, but also some additional pressures coming through in other areas, which is cancelling that out. I set out in my report to the IGB on the 2nd of October areas where I thought that we can deliver the strategic plan priorities within a reduced cost envelope. Some of that is things we need to do now and decide on now that will have an impact next year and the year after. So that's my bit around threading the short term with the medium to longer term. The IGB directed Interim Chief Officer and I to come back with a full recovery plan, including looking at things that would have previously been unpalatable. There will be a special IGB on the 8th of November to consider those options. Those options are going to be really difficult. But that kind of illustrates the urgency that the board as a whole is taken in terms of discharge of their accountabilities. The board also instructed Interim Chief Officer and I to engage with Scottish Government around their position and the risks, and I don't expect them to come up with additional money, but in terms of support they may be able to provide to help our journey towards sustainability. We are not in this place alone. There are a number of other partnerships in really similar position. There are also a number of partnerships in a really similar position to we were in last financial year, where we had reserves to cover it. And there's something around we need to work both with local partners, but with government and with peers around finding the way through these challenges in a sustainable way. I don't underestimate the difficulty of doing that, but the matter is being looked at with great urgency. And in fact, I'm off to speak to my senior management and leadership team just now around just that point, around what we do and how we manage things over winter.
Helen, we were asking for them.
You pro rata, is our overspend consistent with Stirling and indeed the other health board, Falkirk? You have an overview of both. As you said, other authorities are facing the same issue, but how does it look pro rata in terms of Clackmannshire's overspend?
The Clackmannanshire element is higher than Stirling's. Stirling's is also under significant pressure, and in fact, the pressures in the Stirling arm of the budget are increasing faster than Clackmannanshire. We can see some of the same issues coming through. They've just hit a little bit earlier in Clackmannanshire than Stirling. Falkirk also agreed a financial recovery plan at their last IGB meeting, which was about a month ago. So are taking some difficult decisions. They still have a bit of a residual cover through reserves that we've exhausted. But the issues are the same. That goes back to my point. We across Scotland are all hitting the same challenge. It's just a matter of timing and how hard we're hitting those challenges. And some of that's around the individual demographies of partnership areas. Some of it's around political choices around investment levels. And if I look at Clackmannanshire itself, you'll know projected the highest level in terms of any local government area in terms of the growth of over 75s. So we are hitting that real challenge around that demographic challenge that will hit the whole of the country.
Okay, thanks, Ewan. I don't want to thank you for that overview or not, to be quite frank, but thanks for laying it on the line.
Thanks, Chair. Ewan, do you think there's an argument to be made for looking at expenditure where an individual is causing an expenditure above a certain trigger level, that should be dealt with on a national basis? Because, I mean, the choice between paying, £50,000 for one person or £1,000 for 50 people is a difficult one to make. But that decision has to be made, or those kind of decisions have to be made. And I just feel that the spread of population who are needing these big packages is a fairly random occurrence, and it doesn't necessarily always work as a function of the total population in the county. Some counties will have more of a problem, ageing population, out of work, whatever they are, health issues. And it would be an idea, I think, to suggest to those up the line that above a certain value is run as on a pool basis, so that's spread over all authorities. So we don't, one authority with a couple of very, very heavy packages doesn't get clobbered in one financial year with that. Do you think that might get some traction?
I'm not sure, Councillor. I guess there's something around. There's probably there's 31 health and social care partnerships across the country, 32 local authorities. Everybody will have an argument around how they are special. I think there are issues in terms of national policy that national government needs to look at in terms of helping us be sustainable. Probably inappropriate to say much more than that in a public meeting, but some of there are real challenges around all of that. The other thing for me is it's not all about older people. Some of the high tariff stuff is particularly around learning disabilities, and that's where I think we do have inequalities in terms of level of demand across local authorities, but there's also challenges around alternatives for some of these high tariff cases that are really complex, particularly people, learning disability service users coming into early adulthood who are going to have extensive and really complex needs for perhaps 40, 50 years into the future, and we need to try and facilitate models of care which appropriately can meet these service users' needs at a lower cost than we're seeing at the moment, and that's a real challenge as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Can I ask another question? And this is for Lindsay now, to give you a rest, and you must be tired. Lindsay, just a couple of wee silly things, perhaps. Where is it? Yeah, on page 242.8.7, it says the project at West Hall is currently delayed due to contractual issues and awaiting confirmation of grant from Scottish Government. It's the two words awaiting confirmation makes me slightly twitchy. Is there a risk here that this project might suddenly become very much more expensive?
I'll pass you on to my police colleagues, Kevin, to answer that if I could.
Thanks, Lindsay, through your chair, and thanks, Councillor Coyne. In terms of the project, there was a risk with the original Tier 1 contractor not following through and having to contract a new contractor, that prices could go up. However, we met with Hubco only the other week there, who are very confident that we will be able to retain the cost of this project within the financial envelope. We met with Scottish Government only the other day there and relayed that, and we are working with them in terms of securing that whole package of funding associated with the Scottish Government grant. They're keen to work with us, as is the Minister's confirmed that with us as well, that they're keen to work with us. So we're confident that the package will go ahead within that financial envelope.
Can something still go wrong?
That would be life, Councillor, so it would be.
A relief?
Life.
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 Oh, life, right. Okay. All right. Fine. Let me go on to page 247, I think it is. Lindsay, this is called the Council Summary 24-25. Again, on the principle of exec summaries meaning something, the difference of 7.14 million between the total expenditure, including HSP and total funding, is that our expected budget gap for the year?
No. The 7 million would be if we were contributing the share towards the partnership. So our overspend is the 669, which is quoted in the report. So the 6471 is additional to that within the Health and Social Care Partnership.
Okay, thanks. Can we look now at page 248, which is the approved savings list? And a couple of questions there. I've read, Doctor, a couple of things that I just wondered why they had been moved into an at-risk area. For example, increased income from recycling paper and card is an at-risk of 180,000. What's the problem with that? Why is it at risk?
I don't know if Kevin would know the answer to that, Kevin.
Sorry, could you repeat that section to find it in the papers?
Sure, it's page 248. And it's £180,050 expected savings from increased income from recycling paper and card. Why has that been flagged as a risk?
Councillor, and through your chair, in terms of that, it's flagged at risk because it is subject to the market values. And whilst we are confident that we believe we will make that achievement, if the market values change suddenly, then obviously our ability to achieve that rate of return would be put at risk. So it's because of market values, and also the other aspect is if there's behavioural change come in, then it is dependent on our residents recycling their paper. So it's just appropriately risk registered at that.
Okay, thanks. Further down, rent review / service charge review. I know it's only 19,000. I just wondered why, what was threatening that?
For you, Chair, in terms of that one, there is a rent consultation ongoing at present, and obviously for that to conclude and some of the decisions to be made that will potentially impact that piece of work. I'm assuming we're talking about housing rents there.
Sorry, I'll come in. No, it was the saving related to the rents on council properties, so general fund properties where they're leased to tenants in the communities. So I believe from my limited knowledge that there is ongoing discussion around those rent reviews, but again, the timing of when those rents come up for discussion. So it's maybe one that we could provide a bit more detail on at the next Q2 outturn for you.
Thanks, Lindsay, and apologies, Councillor. Another reason for some of that work was in relation to having the appropriate assessor in place to support some of those rent reviews as well, and some of that work's now been put back in place, so that would have also made it challenging too.
Okay, final one then is second bottom item, insurance premium recharge to commercial tenants, 41,000. Just wondering why that can't be a straightforward matter.
I think again in that one, it's in terms of timing. So until we've concluded the full year, we won't know exactly if we've managed to achieve that. So we hope it will be achieved, but it's at risk until we have that confirmation that each of the tenants have been appropriately contacted and billed for the insurance recharges.
So what you're saying, if I understand that answer, is that it will happen sometime, just maybe not this year. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it would be along those lines, Councillor. It's certainly a piece of work we're progressing at present.
I don't think that's me.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the paper, but not happy to move the paper at the same time. So I will move the paper, but obviously we're really concerned, and members, particularly Councillor Benny, has raised concerns about the human impact of the potential savings, and I think the rest of the committee would echo those concerns as well. We're also giving cognizance to the fact that we've been talking about a transformation agenda for a long time within the constituent authorities and the IJB, and we're struggling to obviously progress all of that with the kind of having to meet the immediate needs. So it leaves you a bit sort of at a loss as to what the way forward can be, particularly as you're saying, Ewan, in terms of this is across the whole of Scotland, other areas are dealing with this as well. It sounds like there has to be a national approach to all of this rather than local to meet the finance gap. You know, certainly I hope our colleagues who sit in COSLA would take that forward, because I think, you know, essentially we know that the kind of level of funding for social care has never been quite appropriate. So hopefully in the longer term we can, and I'm not saying that at all politically, it's like, I think it's just absolute common sense that we need to look at, you know, whoever is there that's got control of the budget needs to consider, you know, looking at funding services appropriately. So is anybody happy to second? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if happy is the right word. I certainly second the paper and note with concern the overspend in with the joint integration board. I think, as you've highlighted, Chair, it is a national issue, but as Ewan has highlighted, we've got particular acute issues in Clackmannanshire because of our older population and the demographics. I think at a local level, even embedded within this paper, you can see some of the things that the council is trying to do in terms of moving, for instance, our repairs over to special needs adaptations and things like that. But it still is not tackling the real iceberg that's coming our way in terms of the overspend and the potential impact that would have on this council. And it certainly is an issue that I know the leadership and indeed the Joint Integration Board has taken back to the Scottish Government. But we also know that the difficulties nationwide in terms of finance, but it is a national crisis that once again at a local level, being the smallest mainland local authority and given our demographics, I think we are suffering more than most, and it has to be a real concern that we flag up as an audit committee. So, thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, but I also think it's a travesty if we're sitting here doing all this and talking about this without the government stepping in and doing something. And it's an all way round the country. Something has to happen. Somebody has to stand up and say, no, these people need care. That's why it's the health and social care. And if we start taking the health out of the social care, what's the point? If we can't afford to keep the people in the situation that we were, we need to look at other ways around it. And that could be cheaper socials, cheaper packages, that we don't need to have the ultimate fantastic everything package. As long as these people are comfortable with getting the packages that they're getting and it's not costing an absolute fortune, then that's fine. But we need to be careful that these people are vulnerable as it is, without them being told, no, you can't have that, it's too dear. Or no, you can't do that. No, you can't go there, you can't go there. You can't do that to people, they're human beings. But we can't do this on our own. The IGB and Stirling and Clackmannanshire cannot do this on their own. It has to be a much stronger and much more cohesive people who are thinking more out the box and knowing what to do with money that they've got. But that's my philosophy. Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Okay. We're happy to accept the paper. No, we're accepting it. So moving on to item 14 on the agenda. Oh, sorry. Moving on to item 14 on the agenda, so it's the external audit planning reports, and I think is it Lindsay that's presenting it? Not Lindsay. Rebecca. Lindsay, can you come in?
Sorry, I thought you were going direct to Rebecca. So I've just pass over to my external audit colleague from Deloitte's, Rebecca, to present the audit planning report for the 23-24 accounts. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay. And just to introduce myself, I am Rebecca Conakry. I'm Senior Manager with Deloitte, and I am part of the engagement team on the Clackmannanshire Council audit. We did have Ian House on earlier, but unfortunately has to drop off at the end of the meeting. He is the engagement partner, and we've seen that within the audit plan. I will take
your mic just a bit closer, sorry, didn't hear you.
I will take the audit plan as read, but highlight some key matters to bring to the committee's attention, and then take questions on anything you may want to know more about. Our overall kind of plan is within the introduction. We confirmed that the significant risks in relation to this audit are management override of controls, capital expenditure, and property valuations. Those are consistent across the sector. We do have our wider scope dimension areas, which include financial management, financial sustainability, governance, vision and leadership, and use of resources to improve outcomes. We will follow up in those areas on previous year's work and also the recent Controller of Audit report. We confirm to you our independence and also our fee levels within the appendix to the report. We provided hot topics and sector updates for the committee to familiarise themselves with as a matter of technical updates for you. If there is anything that we as an audit team can provide the committee, please do not hesitate to ask. We confirm our materiality levels as well. Our materiality is based on the expenditure levels of the organisation. Key thing for the committee to note is the expected timetable of our reporting. We are due to receive the draft accounts at the end of November, and we are timetabled to report our ISO 260 or annual audit report to the 20th of March Council.
I just wanted to ask, first of all, as you probably would imagine, there's been a kind of audit and risk committee on the fee. So you had specified when you outlined what the fee was likely to be, that the fee may be higher than the above as a result of the significant risks identified throughout the audit plan. I'm wondering, in view of the fact that Deloitte worked with us the previous year, whether those risks couldn't have been anticipated before we move forward into this year's audit, like, so setting the fee at that level, because obviously it's a local authority for us in our solid financial planning. It's important to know what kind of substantial costs that we have, and I just wondered why there's any dubiety in what the fee might be.
So I suppose in terms of fee setting arrangements, they are dealt with by Audit Scotland. So the fee you see in the plan is the expected fee that they have set, and we don't, as Deloitte, set a fee. However, we may vary that if there's things that arise during the audit process, so that's why we put that in there. We don't intend to vary it if at all possible. It's only if there are issues arising where it causes us additional work over and above the standard.
Again, another question before I bring in Councillor Coyne. In terms of the importance of audit and scrutiny committee has been highlighted as really important, and we obviously as a committee agree that we are very important in this process. We felt a bit of a lack of engagement last year, and also the papers were presented to council before audit and scrutiny. We wondered why that was, because we would see the process as being like we would receive the papers first and then they would go to council, so we would have the chance to scrutinise. Myself and Councillor Coyne both raised that as an issue, and we wonder if there could be more engagement with the committee moving forward due to the importance of the committee in this process.
Certainly, we are committed to more in-person arrangements with the council on an officer level, and also attending audit and scrutiny. We have offered to attend audit and scrutiny regardless of whether we have papers or not, and we are committed to that more in-person collaborative working arrangement. In terms of the process, the governance process for papers, we would take Lindsay's kind of steer over the kind of process that we would follow. So we are happy. Traditionally, in the other local authorities I have experience in, we do go to audit committee before council, but Lindsay can advise us of the kind of correct governance procedure that wants to be followed within Clipmanshire.
Yeah, it was actually a follow-up to Janine's first question, the chair's first question about finance. If you get yourselves in a position where you feel that additional work is required, which is going to be feeable because it's out with the original brief, do you intend to forewarn the council that you feel this work is necessary before you go ahead and do it? Is that your modus operandi? You would always pre-agree the additional work, so there will be no surprise involved. We'll suddenly get a bill one day for a huge number of thousands of pounds and say, what's that for? Nothing should be a surprise in this arrangement, if you understand. Am I correct that that's that will be your approach?
Yes, so where we identify a material issue that requires additional work, we will immediately discuss that with officers. And where that facilitates additional work, there is a potential financial consequence. We will limit that as much as possible by, withdrawing teams or allocating different resources to try and make that as low as possible. But if that does occur, we will immediately work with officers over what additional work is required and what potential impact it could have.
Okay, do you think it would be a sensible courtesy to include the chair of this committee in that narrative at an early stage? We might have a different opinion on things. Okay, thanks.
Something else? No, I think I've got the answer for that one. I looked it up on Google.
Okay, let me just touch on this one. This is on page 288. While the Council has historically achieved financial balance, there remains a potential risk that robust medium to long-term planning arrangements are not in place. There's a risk. Okay, you're not saying that that is the case. You're merely saying that's a risk. Okay, that's fine. Happy with that. Yeah. On page 289, first section, while intended to enhance efficiency and transparency, the changes to the decision-making framework introduce a risk to the control environment. Can you expand on that a wee bit?
Yes, so here we're just looking into the changes that were made to just check whether they have realised the benefits that were intended to the council. Where a committee or any other government structure has a wide remit, there is a risk that it becomes overwhelmed and that appropriate scrutiny is not available within that forum. So, like my attendance today and the other meetings that we'll have with officers and members alike, will kind of ask for people's views, we'll review documentation, we'll review kind of minutes and things just to check, I suppose, that the appropriate scrutiny level is in place.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I've written, sorry.
On page 295, right-hand column, I've written beside that narrative, the regulatory expectations and climate thematic reports, as how necessary and how costly is that. I worry about the climate change fever that's upon us being something that's really, okay, we can do our bit to reduce our carbon footprint, etc. But, it's not our job to save the planet in this council. I just wondered if that was, all this stuff here was going to be very costly. Because we worry about this council.
I suppose I can't necessarily comment on how costly it's going to be overall for an entity. There is an investment required in order to comply with the upcoming disclosures. The Scottish Government did release its sustainability guidance in June of this year, and we would expect bodies to be looking at that to implement in future years, but it is not current. The full TCSD requirements that are signposted within our plan are not yet applicable for all public sector organisations.
Just to stress that Crown Council and Audit Committee are fully, we're fully committed to meeting the climate emergency.
Well, I said it's not our job to say that.
Any other questions? Councillor Zilli?
Just very quickly on page 12 of the report, 280 in their minutes. The valuation for Alva Academy and Alva Primary being reduced by 57.3 million, that sounds, I just can't understand how that would come about. Can you help me out from a layman's perspective in terms of that such a sharp reduction in property values?
I don't know if Lindsay might want to come in on more of the detail around it, but essentially in the prior year we discovered a slight error in the methodology used by the valuer, and that resulted, once it was worked through, in that reduction. But Lindsay may know more about the specific issue within that academy.
Yeah, I think in terms of the interpretation, difference in interpretation between the independent valuer that we use and Deloitte as external auditors. So I don't have the detail as why that was different, but it is just how the guidance is interpreted and how you can value it. So it is a kind of notional value that goes in the balance sheet. So it's not a market value as to we're selling the asset just now. These differences can occur. I don't have the specific detail.
Right, so it's just notional, but it does have an impact, doesn't it, in terms of projections, etc. Moving on though to page 281, page 30. To do a double take on the colour coding there, where limited management judgment's actually in green, whereas as elected members we normally expect green to be a good thing, but in this case it isn't. So could you tell us a little bit about what's behind your evidence in terms of limited management controls in terms of override controls?
So a green is a kind of positive indicator, so it's limited management judgment involved. So that means that where there's lower management judgment involved, that's better. Effectively, right. It's more clear cut, it's less judgmental, less things that could potentially go wrong is the idea. And then obviously as you move to amber and red.
That's fine, so that was me just misreading that's a relief. Right, thank you for that, Chair.
Any other questions? No, well, just happy to formally move the paper. Do I have a seconder? And we're open. Oh, your second councillor. And the paper's open to debate, if anybody wants to debate the paper. Oh, happy to know. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 15, Internal Audit Progress Report, and that is Isabel Wright. So I'll hand over to Isabel.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on progress with completing the 24-25 Internal Audit Plan. The plan agreed by committee in June comprised of 15 assignment areas to be completed by the team during the year. Paragraph 3.1 highlights that 9 internal audit reports will be issued in 24-25. This does not include those reports issued to the Manager and Stirling Integration Joint Board or the Central Scotland Evaluation Joint Board. Paragraph 3.1 also states that to date 2 assignments have been completed to the final report stage, 2 reviews are currently in progress and 5 have yet to be started. A summary of progress is set out at Appendix 1 with the scope and the findings of the 2 finalised reports at Appendix 2. To finish, I'd ask members to note the recommendations and conclusions. That is that the team are making good progress with the 24-25 internal audit work. However, this is always subject to change and resource will be directed to where it adds most value. If you've got any questions, I will try my best to answer them. Thank you.
Isabel, do we have any questions?
Yep, thanks.
In Appendix 2, page 326, third paragraph down, the final sentence, the clarity of governance roles and interrelationships, however, could be improved by formally defining them in an overarching IT and information security policy. Who should draft that?
I think one of the other recommendations in there was around the the establishment of a cyber security incident response team. So I would think that all of these recommendations would go together in that way, so that when that team was set up, they would take on responsibility for that, is my thinking, unless Chris has got any other thoughts on that.
So obviously, Shirley, Senior Manager for Action and Transformation, myself and the IT team will be looking at that. We'll be developing these policies and rolling them out.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I'm happy to formally move the paper. Do I have a seconder? Yeah, thanks, Martha. Paper's open to debate. Anybody like to debate the paper? Okay, are we happy to accept the paper? Yeah. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 16 on the agenda, Internal Audit Charter, and that's Isabel again.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this report seeks the committee's approval of an updated internal audit charter. The charter sets out the role, the authority and responsibility of the internal audit team. Section 3 of the report explains the considerations of the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards 2017. The standards require that all public sector internal audit providers establish an internal audit charter. Paragraph 3.2 confirms that the charter is a high-level document. It sets out the role, the authority and responsibility of the internal audit team and must be approved by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee. Paragraph 3.3 highlights that the standards are currently undergoing a review, with new standards anticipated in April 25. Paragraph 3.5 confirms that if any related changes require it, the internal audit charter will be updated and brought back to committee. The charter was last approved in August 2022 and reflects the joint working arrangements with Falkirk Council via a consolidated charter. The updated version is attached to Appendix 1, and the table in paragraph 3.5 summarises the amendments that have been made since the August 2022 version for ease of reading. The committee is therefore asked to consider and approve the internal audit charter attached to Appendix 1. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel. Do you have any questions? No? Okay. I'm happy to move the paper. Do I have a seconder? Yeah. Councillor Coyne, and open to debate. Anyone like to debate the paper? No. So we've been asked to approve the internal audit charter at Appendix 1. Are we happy to approve? Okay, thank you. We're on to our final paper, item 17 on the agenda, the Corporate Risk Register, and that is Sherry who will be putting it forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. This report provides committee with the Q2 update on the Council's Corporate Risk Register, which is provided at Appendix A. Audit and Scrutiny Committee on a regular basis are provided with and provide scrutiny on the Council's risk register, as well as our approaches to identifying and managing risks in line with the Council's risk management strategy. The committee is asked to note that the risk profile has changed since the previous update provided in August, with the demotion of 3 risks to Directorate registers and the inclusion of 3 new risks. A total of 18 risks are recorded on the corporate register. Of the 3 new risks, 2 are newly defined regarding compliance with the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, or UNCRC, and the condition of the school estate. The 3rd risk relates to reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, or RAC, previously included in the Police Directorate register. No risks have increased in score this quarter, and the scores for organisational transformation and industrial unrest have reduced. A full breakdown of the risk profile is provided at Appendix A. Myself, along with colleagues, are happy to take any questions on the report.
Thanks very much, Shirley. In terms of you mentioned about the RAC being put into the risk register, and I think that with what's happened, that's really important. But I was wondering, we've obviously looked at the risk aspect on the domestic properties, more domestic properties maybe being affected, and I know that there's been initial reviews and that's not been found. I was just wondering, I think there's more to this risk than that. There's the risk to the people who are involved and who are being impacted by the RAC situation, and I just wonder if that can be brought into the risk register in terms of the human costs, in terms of the people who have been impacted by RAC, whether that's been considered, and also, like, you know, potentially what may come down the line in terms of cost to council, depending on what's agreed to enable those individuals to get their lives back in some kind of way.
I think it's quite a complicated risk, the RAC one, but I'll perhaps invite my colleagues from Place just to provide a bit more information on this risk in particular.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies. In terms of this piece of work, obviously, the aspect that we've highlighted is that management. We do recognise that there is also that reputational damage that could be associated with this. And that's also about instances around personal impacts, including financials around our individuals within the narrative that is there. We can do work in terms of augmenting some of the narrative around that to be more clearer in terms of the sentiment, in terms of the aspect that you raised there. We can make that amendment if that is so wished, but certainly something that we are monitoring and continuing to engage with those affected by the situation. Thanks.
Yeah, apologies. Lee just pointed out to me there is a sentence that covers that, so I appreciate that, like on that box. So yeah, I mean, and it's also good to see with the report that came to council recently, the school estate side. So with view of the council approving the expenditure on the school estate, do you see that risk then coming down once that's been resolved?
Through you, Chair, in terms of the school estate, certainly our ambition is that that investment into improving the school estate will and reduce the likelihood of any impact, and also reduce any impact of any disruption to education provision. So yeah, I do anticipate that once the work is underway or completed, that risk itself will reduce. It will also impact and link connect with the asset management strategy that we're doing in terms of managing that overall wider risk.
Okay, thank you. I'm just sort of passing on a question from Councillor Forson as well in terms of the RAC. Do you have any idea when papers will come to council?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of paper, we are currently working on options appraisal paper that will come to council as soon as possible. Staff are working through those various different options, the costs involved and the complexity of each of those options that are available. We are also working alongside local residents in terms of informing some of that paper, and it would be our intention to get it to you. It won't be for the November council, but hopefully one after that.
Quickly, simple thing to show you. The three risks that were demoted, and I don't think they're listed here, are they? Do you happen to know what they are? Or where?
I think they were included in the August report, but I'll maybe just invite Judy Richardson in just to remind us, because I'm not sure I would be able to bring that to mind either.
Apologies, I just need to double check. I believe one of them was, in fact, possibly two of them were extremism and serious organised crime. Apologies. And the other one was academic attainment because of improved results in that respect. Let me just double check. That's correct. Yes, I believe it was extremism and radicalisation, serious organised crime, and academic attainment.
Thank you.
Okay, do any other questions? Happy to formally move the paper, thanks Cherie. Do I have a seconder? Councillor.
I'm happy to second it, and I'm pleased to see that included in the, so that's.
Paper's open to debate. Anybody want to debate the paper? So we're happy to note the paper. After a marathon meeting, that's us finished. Thank you, everybody. Yay. Well done. Thank you.